I had already been home for 2 hours when I got back in the car. I cannot explain it with more precision than that. I had left the hospital at 8 o'clock, the end of visiting hours, the same time I had left every night for 22 days, and I had driven home and heated something in the microwave and sat at the kitchen table in the specific exhaustion that becomes its own kind of normal when you have been living inside a vigil for 3 weeks. Then I got back in the car. I had learned in 3 weeks not to question the instinct. There are things that visiting hours and sleep schedules and the practical requirements of sustaining your own life can demand of you, and then there are things that override those demands, and this was one of the overriding ones. Something in me needed to be near the hospital. Something in me needed to be closer than the kitchen table 25 minutes away. I drove. It was 9:47 when I pulled into the parking structure. I had my hospital ID lanyard, the one they give family members of long-term patients, around my neck from the day's visit. I walked through the structure, and through the exterior doors, and through the lobby, and toward the elevator. The guard was at the elevator bank. He was not someone I recognized, which meant he was covering an evening shift, which meant he did not know me from the 3 weeks of daily visits. He stepped forward. "Ma'am." His voice was professional and final. "Visiting hours are over. You cannot enter. Rules are rules." The hallway had a handful of people in it, late-night hospital traffic, staff and family members, and one orderly with a cart. Several of them had paused to look. I stood there. I had my lanyard. I had been coming here every day for 22 days. I knew the names of the night nurses on the 3rd floor and the specific sound the elevator made when it reached that level and the particular quality of the light in the ICU waiting room at 11 o'clock when the rest of the hospital was quieter. I did not argue. I stood at that elevator bank, and I waited. And then I heard footsteps, quick, deliberate, not running but close to it, coming from the direction of the administrative corridor. The man who came around the corner was Dr. James Calloway. He had been Emma's attending physician for 22 days. I had spoken with him every morning on his rounds and sometimes in the afternoon when there was something to update. He was in his 50s, precise and unhurried in his explanations, with the specific quality of physicians who understand that what they say and how they say it becomes part of what a family carries. He was not unhurried now. He looked at the guard. "Let her in," he said. "Now." He looked at me. "Come with me," he said. I followed him to the elevator. He pressed 3. He did not speak during the ride. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, and he turned left toward the ICU, toward the room I had been coming to every day for 22 days, I followed him without asking where we were going because I already knew where we were going. When I walked through that door and saw where he had taken me and what was in that room, my entire body went numb. Before I tell you what I saw, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what country you are watching from. Now let's begin. My name is Laura Simmons. I am 42 years old, and Emma is my daughter. She is 17. She is a junior in high school with a particular gift for languages. She had been studying 4 of them simultaneously, which her teachers considered remarkable, and she considered a logical response to finding them interesting. She runs track. She makes playlists with a seriousness I find both baffling and endearing. She has the specific quality of attention that some teenagers have, and that, in her case, manifests as a way of watching people during a conversation that makes them feel, when she turns it on them, as though they are the only person in the world worth paying attention to. She was in the passenger seat of a friend's car on a Friday night 3 weeks ago when the car went through an intersection and was struck on the passenger side by a vehicle running a red light. The friend was not seriously injured. Emma was airlifted to Meridian General's Trauma Center. Dr. Calloway was the attending who took her case. The first night, he explained the situation to me in the way that I have come to understand is the honest and appropriate way to explain these situations, in terms of what was known and what was not known, in terms of what the imaging showed and what the next 24 hours would determine, in terms of the realistic range of possible outcomes without collapsing that range prematurely in either direction. What was known? Emma had sustained a traumatic brain injury. She had been stabilized. She was on a ventilator. Her brain activity was present and, in some areas, active. What was not known? When and how fully she might emerge from the state she was in. I had been at the hospital every day since the Friday night. 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening, and then home, and then back the next day. The routine of a vigil has its own structure. The morning arrival, the conversation with the nurses about overnight, the time spent in her room talking to her in the way they had told me to talk, about ordinary things, about the things she cared about what was happening in the world and at home and at school, about her playlists and her languages and the track season that was continuing without her. I talked. She breathed. 22 days of that. And then on the 22nd night, I went home. And 2 hours later, I got back in the car. Dr. Calloway told me what had happened while we were in the elevator. He told it quickly and clearly, the way he told everything. At 8:40, 40 minutes after I had left, the night nurse on the ICU floor had noticed a change in Emma's responsiveness indicators. Subtle at first, then less subtle. She had alerted Dr. Calloway, who had been in the building finishing documentation. He had come to the room. At 9:15, Emma had opened her eyes. Not briefly, not the brief, reflexive openings that had happened twice before and meant nothing clinically. She had opened her eyes and kept them open and tracked the movement of the nurse who was adjusting her monitoring leads. At 9:30, they had made the decision to trial extubation, to remove the breathing tube and see whether she could breathe independently. She could. At 9:42, the nurse had leaned close and said Emma's name. Emma had turned her head toward the sound. The nurse had said, "Your mom has been here every day. Is there anything you want to say?" Emma had looked at the door. She had said one word. "Mom." Dr. Calloway's team had tried my phone at 9:43. I had not answered because I was in the parking structure with my phone in my bag. He had gone to find me himself. The door to Emma's room was the same door it had always been, the same rectangle of reinforced glass, the same handle, the same dim light visible through the small window. I had stood at this door every morning for 22 days. Dr. Calloway held it open. I walked through. Emma was in the bed. The breathing tube was gone. The ventilator had been moved to the side. She was connected to monitoring leads and in 4-line, and the particular careful network of equipment that 22 days had made familiar to me, but the central fact of the room had changed in the 40 minutes since I had last been there. She was looking at the door. She was looking at me. I do not have words for what happens to a body when it reaches the end of 22 days of sustained endurance and suddenly, in a single moment, understands that the thing it was enduring toward has arrived. I have read descriptions of it, and none of them are fully accurate. The closest I can come is this. Every part of me that had been held taut for 3 weeks released simultaneously, and the sensation of that release is what I can only describe as numbness. Not the numbness of absence, but the numbness of too much at once, the specific overload of a nervous system receiving information it has been waiting a very long time to receive. I crossed the room. I sat in the chair beside her bed, the chair I had been sitting in every day. Her hand was on the blanket. I took it. She looked at me. Her eyes were tired and uncertain in the way of someone waking from something they cannot fully articulate. But they were clear. They were hers. She said, "I heard you." I did not understand immediately.
"Talking," she said.
"About my playlists." A pause, the effort of speaking apparent in the deliberateness of it. "I heard you the whole time. I did not leave that night. Dr. Calloway did not ask me to. The guard on the evening shift, who I saw briefly when a nurse escort walked me past the elevator bank for a cup of coffee from the family room, looked at me with the expression of someone who has received information that recalibrated something. I did not have anything to say to him. He had been doing his job. The rules he cited were real rules. What overrode them was not my status or my credentials, but the specific medical situation happening on the 3rd floor, a situation that Dr. Calloway had determined required the patient's mother in the room as quickly as possible. The rules exist and they matter, and they also were not the final word that night. Emma was in the hospital for another 11 days after that night. The recovery was not instantaneous or simple. Traumatic brain injury is a condition whose rehabilitation timeline is long and nonlinear, and there were days in those 11 days that were harder than the night she woke up. But she came home. She is doing the work of recovery now, the physical therapy, the cognitive exercises, the slow and sometimes frustrating process of rebuilding what was disrupted. She is doing it with the specific quality of attention she brings to everything she cares about, which is to say methodically and somewhat impatiently, and with more persistence than you would expect from someone 17 years old. She has been working on her fourth language. She says she fell behind while she was unconscious, and she intends to catch up. I have been asked many times what made me get back in the car that night. I do not have an answer that satisfies the question because the honest answer is, I don't know. Something that I can only call instinct and that I have no clinical or rational framework for. A pull toward the hospital that overrode the reasonable claims of exhaustion and visiting hours and the 20-minute drive I had just completed. I got in the car. I drove. The guard was following the rules, and the rules exist for reasons that are legitimate, and I did not have an argument available to me that would have moved him, not one that he would have been required to accept. What I had was the patience to stand still while something else moved. Dr. Calloway moved. He covered the distance from his office to the elevator bank to the lobby in the time it took me to stand at that elevator and wait. I want to say something about that. Not about the guard who was doing his job, and not even primarily about Dr. Calloway, who was responding to a clinical situation with appropriate urgency. I want to say something about the instinct that puts you in the parking structure at 9:43 when the call comes at 9:43. I do not know what it is or where it lives. I know that it told me to get back in the car. I know that I listened. And I know that when Emma said I heard you the whole time, when she looked at me from that bed with the tired, clear eyes of someone who had been somewhere and come back, I understood, in a way I could not have understood before, that every word I had said in that room for 22 days had landed exactly where it was meant to. She heard me. I came. That is the whole of it.